Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss the new stories we share. Let's begin. The wine glass shattered against the floor and my whole world seemed to crack along with it. I remember the silence that followed, how every fork stopped moving, how every conversation died mid-sentence, how dozens of eyes turned toward me like I was something to watch, something to pity. My name is Alina. I was 26 years old that night, working at Bella Vista, one of the most expensive Italian restaurants in the city. The kind of place where a single appetizer cost more than I made in an hour. The kind of place where people wore their wealth like armor. And I was invisible to them. Just the girl who brought bread baskets and refilled water glasses, until I became visible for all the wrong reasons. The woman at table 14 had knocked into my arm as I reached to pour her husband's Pinot Noir. It was an accident. Her elbow, my wrist. Simple physics, but when that glass tumbled from my tray and exploded against the marble floor, you would have thought I had committed a crime. Are you completely incompetent? Her voice sliced through the restaurant like a blade. Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? There were tiny droplets of red wine on her sleeve, maybe 3 or 4, barely visible against the dark fabric, but she stood up, and she kept going. I want to speak to your manager immediately. People like you shouldn't be allowed near civilized society. You probably can't even read the menu you're serving from. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak. I wanted to apologize, explain, defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. Her husband leaned back in his chair with this smirk on his face, like he was entertained, like I was some kind of performance. Honestly, Patricia, he chuckled, what do you expect from places that hire anyone with a pulse? Laughter rippled from their table, their friends, 4 of them, all dressed in designer labels and judgment. They laughed like I wasn't standing right there, like I wasn't human. I felt my eyes burning. I would not cry. I couldn't. Not here, not in front of them. What they didn't know was that I had worked a double shift. What they didn't know was that my mother was in the hospital fighting cancer, and the bills were eating through every penny I had. What they didn't know was that I had been up since 4 in the morning, studying for night classes because I was determined to build something better. They saw a clumsy waitress in a cheap uniform. They didn't see the girl who hadn't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. The girl who had sold her car to cover last month's rent. The girl who smiled through exhaustion because giving up wasn't an option. I bent down to pick up the broken glass. My hands were shaking, and that's when I noticed him. In the corner booth, a man sat alone. Silver hair, weathered face, quiet eyes that watched everything without saying a word. He wasn't laughing. He was looking at me like he could see something no one else in that room could see. I cleaned up the glass in silence. Every shard felt like a piece of my dignity I was collecting from the floor. Marcus, my manager, appeared beside me with that familiar expression of disappointment. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His silence was punishment enough. Take 5 minutes, he said quietly. Compose yourself, then get back on the floor. I nodded. What else could I do? The staff bathroom was small and cold, fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. A cracked mirror I had stared into 1,000 times before. I gripped the edges of the sink and let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The tears came then, silent, hot, angry. I was so tired of being small, so tired of being looked through, so tired of people deciding my worth based on what I wore or where I worked. I thought about my mother in that hospital bed, how she had worked 3 jobs to raise me after my father left, how she always told me that kindness was the only currency that mattered, how she would be heartbroken if she saw me crying in a bathroom because strangers were cruel. I wiped my face, straightened my apron, looked myself in the eyes. You are more than this moment, I whispered. Get back out there. The dining room had returned to its normal rhythm. Conversations, clinking glasses, the subtle music that made rich people feel comfortable spending $300 on pasta. I avoided table 14. Let someone else deal with them. I was refilling water at the bar station when a voice appeared beside me. Excuse me. I turned. It was the man from the corner booth. Up close, he seemed older than I first thought. Late 60s, maybe. He wore a simple gray blazer, no tie, nothing flashy. But there was something about his presence that commanded attention without demanding it. I saw what happened out there, he said. His voice was calm. Measured, are you all right? I stiffened. I'm fine, sir. Can I get you something? He studied me for a moment, not in a way that felt intrusive, more like he was trying to understand something. What's your name? Alina. Alina. He repeated it like he was testing its weight. I'm Richard, and I owe you an apology. I blinked. An apology for what? For sitting there and doing nothing while those people treated you like that. I should have spoken up. I didn't know what to say. Customers never apologized, certainly not for things they didn't even do. It's not your fault, I managed. People like that, they just exist. You learn to survive it. He tilted his head slightly. Do you, or do you learn to bury it until it suffocates you? The question landed somewhere deep, somewhere I had built walls around. Can we talk? He asked. Just for a moment, I have something I'd like to share with you. Something in his eyes told me this wasn't ordinary. This mattered. We sat at his corner booth. My manager shot me a questioning look, but Richard waved him away with quiet authority. 34 years ago, Richard began, folding his hands on the table. I was exactly where you are, different restaurant, same humiliation. I said nothing, just listened. I was 19, washing dishes in a steakhouse downtown. One night I dropped a tray of glasses. The owner screamed at me in front of the entire staff, called me worthless, said I would never amount to anything. He paused and I saw something flicker behind his eyes, old pain that never fully heals. I went home that night and sat in my car for 2 hours. I had $17 to my name, no family, no degree, no prospects. I seriously considered never going back. What made you go back? I asked. Spite, mostly. A small smile crossed his face. I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to become someone he would never be able to look down on again. And did you? I bought that steakhouse 12 years later, tore it down and built a shelter for homeless youth on the same spot. The words settled over me like a revelation. I had heard stories like this before, of course, rags to riches, but something about the way he said it felt different. It felt earned. I'm not telling you this to brag, Alina. I'm telling you because I recognize something in you, the way you held yourself together out there, the way you didn't crumble even when everything in you probably wanted to. That's not common. I didn't have a choice, I said softly. I have people depending on me. Tell me about them. So I did. I told him about my mother, the cancer. The treatments that were working slowly, but that cost more than I could ever dream of affording. I told him about the night classes I was taking in business administration, about the tiny apartment with the broken heater, about the dreams I kept locked away because dreaming felt like a luxury. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned forward. I run a company, several actually, real estate, technology, a few things in between, but what I really do is invest in people. My heart started beating faster. I'm not offering you charity, he continued. I'm offering you an opportunity, a real one. I need an executive assistant, someone organized, someone resilient, someone who understands what it means to fight for something. The salary would cover your mother's treatment, and there would be room to grow. I stared at him. Why me? You don't even know me. I know enough. I know that woman destroyed your dignity in front of 50 people and you still went back to work. That tells me everything about your character. Before I could respond, the front door of the restaurant swung open, and the woman from table 14 walked back in. Patricia stormed toward the hostess stand, her husband trailing behind her like a shadow. I left my bracelet, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Diamond, extremely valuable. If anyone here touched it, I will personally see to it that this entire establishment is shut down. The hostess scrambled to check lost and found while Patricia's eyes swept the room with contempt, and then they landed on me. You, she pointed a manicured finger in my direction. You were at our table. Did you take it? The accusation hit like a slap. No, I didn't touch anything except the broken glass. Of course you'd say that. She started walking toward us. People like you always lie, always take what doesn't belong to them. I want her searched. Now. My hands started trembling again, the injustice of it, the sheer cruelty, but before I could speak, Richard stood up. That's enough. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of authority that stopped Patricia mid-stride. Excuse me. She looked him up and down, clearly unimpressed by his simple blazer. Who are you? My name is Richard Calloway. The blood drained from Patricia's face. Even her husband went pale. Richard Calloway. The Richard Calloway, founder of Calloway Enterprises, philanthropist, one of the most powerful businessmen in the state. You know who I am, Richard continued, stepping closer. Which means you know that I could make one phone call and ensure you never eat at any establishment worth dining at again. But that's not why I'm standing here. He looked at me, then back at Patricia. This woman, he said, gesturing toward me, has more dignity and grace in her smallest gesture than you have displayed in your entire performance tonight. You humiliated her. You accused her of theft without a shred of evidence. And you did it because you thought she had no power to fight back. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Your bracelet is probably in your car or in your purse or wherever careless people leave expensive things they don't truly appreciate. But either way, you owe this woman an apology. Silence stretched across the restaurant. Patricia's husband tugged at her arm. Let's just go, Patricia. She pulled away, her face twisted with humiliation. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. I really did, but she didn't. She simply turned and walked out, her husband following. Richard watched them leave, then he turned to me. "Are you okay?" And for the first time that night, I actually felt like someone genuinely wanted to know the answer. "I think so," I said. "Thank you for saying all of that." I meant every word. He reached into his pocket and handed me a card. "The offer stands, Alina. If you want it, be at my office Monday morning, 9 sharp." I took the card. My hands were still shaking, but now it was different. It was hope. That was 3 years ago. I remember walking into Richard's office that Monday morning. My only decent blazer, shoes I had polished 4 times the night before, a resume that felt too thin for someone who carried so much responsibility on her shoulders. But Richard didn't care about the resume. He cared about what I was willing to become. The first year was brutal. I made mistakes, learned systems I never knew existed, stayed late when everyone else went home. There were nights I doubted myself, nights I wondered if I was just pretending to belong in rooms I was never meant to enter. But Richard believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. My mother's treatment was fully covered within 6 months. I was there when her doctor announced the cancer was in remission. I held her hand and cried tears I had been saving for years. She kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," and I kept telling her she had nothing to thank me for. She had given me everything, the strength, the resilience, the belief that kindness would eventually find its way back, and it did. Today, I'm the director of community outreach for Callaway Enterprises. I oversee scholarship programs for young women from low-income families. I visit schools and shelters and tell my story, not because it's extraordinary, but because it proves that extraordinary things can happen to ordinary people. I still think about that night at Bella Vista, the shattered wine glass, the laughter, the way Patricia looked at me like I was nothing. She was wrong, so completely wrong, but I don't hate her. I actually feel sorry for her, because she will never know what it feels like to be lifted up by a stranger's kindness. She will never experience the magic of being seen when you feel invisible. She will live her entire life surrounded by wealth and still somehow remain the poorest person in every room. Richard retired last year. At his farewell party, he called me up to the stage and said something I will never forget. "Alina taught me that the best investment I ever made wasn't in buildings or technology. It was in believing in someone who had stopped believing in herself." I cried, of course, but they were good tears, the kind that wash away the old pain and leave something clean behind. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or worthless, please hear me. One moment can change everything. One person seeing you, one choice to keep going, one act of kindness that becomes a door you never expected to walk through. Your story isn't over, it's just getting started. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and visit the channel for more real-life stories.